Hello everyone, if this is your first talk with us today, then welcome to the Sales Enablement Festival. And for those of you who've already been tuning in to our selection of talks, welcome back. We have so much more amazing content heading your way, but before we get back into it, we just want to take this moment to thank all our amazing sponsors and partners for bringing this virtual festival to life. We also want to thank you, our attendees, for joining us today. If you're enjoying the content from the festival, be sure to check out the SEC membership plans. It's here where you can gain access to exclusive content, research and frameworks, and discounts to things like our brand new workshop series and so much more. You can find more information about this over on the Sales Enablement Collective website. Don't forget to have your questions ready for the live Q&A at the end of this talk, as you'll have the chance to put them to the experts themselves. That's everything from me, so all that's left to do is sit back and enjoy this next talk. Hello everyone, and yes, welcome back to this next talk. This talk is hosted by Georgia Watson, who is the Enablement and Skills Transformation Lead over at IBM, and she's going to talk to you all about the innovation imperative for businesses and learning. So Georgia, over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me just get my slides back up. So welcome everybody. Did you know the pace of change has never been this fast, and it will never be this slow again? So disruptive technology, new business models are revolutionizing the way that we work, the way that we buy, the way that we sell, and also the skills that we need. And it's happening so quickly, and of course, it's not going to slow down. So how do businesses keep up? What about your sellers? What about you as enablers? We need to evolve. We need to always think differently, and we need to innovate. My name is Georgia Watson, and thank you very much for joining today's session. We're going to talk about the innovation imperative for business and learning. Well, that's what I call it anyway. So disruption is impacting everything that is happening around us. And what we're going to look at today is our change in our context. I'll talk about the innovation imperative and then share a couple of thoughts around service selling and design thinking. So disruption is changing everything, as we know. It's changing the way that businesses function, how they sell, and it's impacting us as individuals as well. And according to McKinsey, more than 90% of B2Bs have actually transitioned now to a virtual sales model. So the move to remote selling again means different approaches to the way that we work, different selling styles and different skills. And of course, with the pandemic, there's been massive changes to spending patterns, with some reducing spend, others maintaining, and some even increasing it. But there are so many variables around that one. Companies big and small are currently plotting their post-pandemic futures. One thing is very clear, that the future is going to be digital. And this obviously has huge implications for how we sell and how we enable our sellers. In this report that was done by McKinsey, they found that in B2B organizations, they felt that digital interactions had become twice as important during 2020. And this change is only going to continue. So thematic investing actually dubbed the 2020s as a decade of work transformation. And I would add it's transformation for business as well as learning and skills as well. So we all need different skills in our jobs and, compared to what we were doing 3 years ago. And many of our sellers also are needing very different kinds of sales skills to work in this, remote or digital environment that many of our teams are still working in. The other big shift is that our employees, those who we're supporting maybe to upskill, now have these new consumer-grade expectations about their learning experience. They want, empowering, self-directed learning of the absolute highest quality. And a big change is coming also in roles. So thematic investing highlighted that 100 million workers will need to switch occupations by 2030 post-COVID. So I'm sharing this because I feel we can't look at enablement without considering this broader context. And this broader changes that are going on, of course, impacts us personally as well at a very human level. So as I guess you all know, many of us have had a massive increase in screen time as we shifted to remote working. And for those of us who are still working remotely, some data puts this as an average of an increase of 5 hours per day, which is huge on its own. Other data highlighted that it could be 12 plus hours behind a screen each day. I think that sounds like perhaps my son. If I didn't come and take away his iPad, I think not many of us would be volunteering to have such huge chunks of time behind the screen. But this is our reality. Now, the American Society of Microbiology actually did research this year, and they drew a direct correlation between the increase in screen time during the pandemic and what they call mental distress. And so sellers are not immune to this. Nobody is. The State of Mental Health in Sales report was done this year, and they surveyed almost 800 sellers. And almost 3 out of the 5 salespeople indicated that they were struggling with the mental health on the day that they were surveyed. So this is huge, and 52% said their mental health was worse than it was before 2020. So this obviously has really big implications when we think about employee well-being, motivation, engagement, readiness to learn, let alone performance and results. And so we're not really going to address these further in today's session, particularly not mental health. I think that warrants like a whole nother discussion on its own. But I do want to keep them in mind. And the other thing is that we're also more distracted than ever. So we have our work from home distractions. There may or may not be children popping in and out during this session, I don't know. But we also have technology distractions. We are continually with our phones, and they are continually pinging us, email, social media, Slack. We are continually getting notifications. And it's not good for our health. So reviews.org did some research on people accessing their phone. And the number one health complication they found was this decreased concentration and focus on motivation. So this is a real issue in the sales force. Now, pretend you didn't see that slide. I want to ask you a question. My phone is here beside me, and even while I'm presenting, it's on silent and turned down, but it's still pinging away. So I'd love you to share in the chat, how many times do you look at your phone per day? Have a guess. There's really no right number. Pop your number into the chat. I'd love to see what you think. So too many times, Andrew says, around 100. I think I'm there with you, too many times. Radmila says 200, Paul 120, Will 250. I think I'm up there with you, Will. Rita says 100 plus, more than 200. Yeah. So here's the thing, we are continually distracted by our phones. So in some research, it was found that Americans check their phones an average of 262 times per day. So this is huge if you think about just the waking hours in the day. And I think we can make some assumptions about other parts of the world as well. So the context has changed very significantly for business, and it's also changed very significantly for sellers. Now, this is not actually something new. We know that context is always changing, and we know that businesses also are continually evolving. So let's look at IBM, so where I currently work. I'd like to ask you another question. In the chat, who can tell me or have a guess at some products or solutions that you think IBM made when they first started? Now, I'll give you a hint. IBM has been around for over 100 years. So pop in the chat, have a random guess if you don't know. Tell me what you think it was that IBM made when they first started. Feel free to have a guess if you don't know. Typewriters. Oh, Yeah, good. Anyone else? PCs. Yes, we did PCs. We did those. Any more guesses? So my favorite thing that IBM made was this. It's a cheese slicer. So IBM made a number of different things. So weighing and tabulating machines when they first started, through to this, my favorite, the cheese slicer. So we've kind of moved from cheese slicers to supercomputers and cloud and AI over the period of 100 years. So IBM, like many other big multinationals today, has consistently invested in R&D. It's also consistently reinvented itself. We're pretty far removed from the cheese slicer these days. But IBM is also pretty synonymous with innovation because it has continually been a focus. Now, not all companies have done that, of course. So I think many of you will recognize this. Now, Blockbuster is clearly not around anymore. But what I'd like to talk to you about is another example, Kodak. So Kodak also didn't keep up with the digital revolution for fear of cannibalizing what was actually its strongest product line in photo film. So they were actually the leader in this space of all photographic equipment and marketing at the time. And they had even done heaps of R&D and came up with the technology for digital photos. But here's the kicker. They didn't release it. They didn't do anything with it for the fear of cannibalizing their largest line, which was the photo film. So as a result, they ended up filing for bankruptcy and in 2012, and a year later, they actually then came back with a much more smaller consolidated company focusing on just a very niche group of commercial customers. So businesses evolving is not new. What is new is the pace with which it needs to be done. It's also the pace that the sales force needs to adapt. And beyond adapt, I would say it's the pace that they need to innovate. Now, if you remember nothing from this presentation, I would love you to remember this. Businesses that invest in innovation make higher revenue. This is according to McKinsey. In past crises, companies that invested in innovation delivered far superior growth post-crisis. So much growth, in fact, that during the crisis, historically, those who invested in innovation outperformed in the crisis by 10% financially, and post-crisis, they outperformed their competitors by 30%. So if that's not case for innovation, then I'm not sure what is. So innovation is an imperative for business. It needs to be a priority. Now, the business itself is, of course, dependent on the people working in it to innovate. And for innovation to happen, it has to include, well, it should include diverse thinking, diverse perspectives, which come from diverse people. And there are many, many different factors that influence innovation, like there are many, many different dimensions and intersections when we think about diversity and inclusion. I just wanted to share one example because, again, I could talk a whole nother presentation about inclusion. It's a great area of passion for me. But let's just look at gender. So the IBM Institute of Business Value did a study that looked at the dimension of gender equality. And the analysis reveals a correlation between organizations that report outperforming in gender equality and those who outperform also in profitability. They were called the first movers in the research, and this group of companies took action around inclusion, and they reported having their higher employee satisfaction and also more innovation within their company. So gender diversity leads to innovation. So imagine if you extrapolate that out to all of the other different areas within diversity. You know, we know that diverse teams are the antidote to the dangers of groupthink. Now, innovation is imperative for a business, but it's also an imperative for sellers. Sellers need to be buyer-centric, and sellers have to deliver value. And in most B2B scenarios, the clients who the sellers are dealing with, they also need to innovate. They need to evolve to ensure that their business stays relevant and stays financially viable. Now, I have another question for you. So in the chat, I'd love to hear from you. Has anybody enjoyed being sold something? Give me a yes or a no in the chat. Do you enjoy being sold something? Andrew says yes, most of the time. Hendrik too says yes. Paul says not really. Brad Malia, no. Nige, no. Victoria, depending if it's well done, good points. Will says no. Terence says yes. And Oliver says not often. So it's kind of mixed. So when you look at research, most people don't enjoy being sold to. We can really enjoy buying, but being sold to is kind of a different experience. It's when the telemarketer calls and you very quickly want to hang up the phone. You don't want someone pushing and selling something to you. Salesforce did some research and they actually showed that this whole experience that the company provides is now more important than ever. And B2B buyers saw it as even more important than consumers. So they're looking really for this experience even over the product. So 85% of business buyers felt the experience was as important as the product, and 79% of consumers. So we're looking at the entire experience, of course, not just sellers. Now, sellers, of course, need to maximize the value that they are delivering, of course. Now, to make sure that this is a positive experience. Now, there's actually a much more limited window than ever before of face-to-face time, or this high value, might even be remote, but still high value time that our sales force have with prospects. So Gartner put this at 17%. So during that 17%, this is the time that the seller has to make a really positive impact. This little limited window, they have to deliver the most value they can to their clients. If it's B2B, this is where they need to help the clients innovate them. They need to help them innovate and they need to add value. And of course, there's many ways that they can do this. And in my view, it's not to sell to them. They need to add value. So we see this shift from selling to serving. Those days of pushing, selling are really gone. Nobody is interested in taking that approach anymore. So we need to think about how the seller can really support the clients and their needs without thinking about what sales play it is they need to make or what their target is at the moment. And one way that we can do this is by utilizing design thinking. And this is one of many ways, but we don't have time to cover them all. But I wanted to share this one with you today. So when sellers use design thinking methods while collaborating with their clients, the clients feel that they are there to serve them. They are not there to sell to them. This is a very different feeling. They didn't show up with, a 100-page PowerPoint deck and the sales pitch and the company value proposition. They showed up listening. They showed up asking questions, and they showed up clarifying what they were hearing. So by doing this, they get to understand what the client's goals are, their problems, their organizational structure. If they're lucky, they might get to understand what is really broken in the organization, looking at in design thinking what we call an as-is scenario. And if you get it right, the client will also share what their aspirations are, what their hopes are, what their design thinking to be vision is. So it's not selling, it's just serving. It's opening the doors, and it's really a game changer. So now that a seller has this opportunity to co-create a solution with their client, they can help them transform their companies, and they're collaborating together. So together they will be toasting the success that they had. So through this collaboration and co-creation, they'll also be able to bring out, the best in each other in terms of the buyer and the vendor through exploring options, prioritizing, road mapping, prototyping, iterating to get to the best solution. And where the magic is, you then see the team working as one. So client and vendor all working towards a common goal. And this is a great way to succeed together. And so we can use design thinking for a foundation of so many interactions. And there's so much potential in design thinking for sellers as an approach. And one of the really great things about it is not just that the output and the end result is stronger, but along the way, the sellers are really increasing their levels of trust, credibility, and also understanding of the client situation. And CSO Insights did a study, and they found that 88% of buyers agree that they only want to buy from salespeople who they see as trusted advisors. And to be a trusted advisor, you have to have, that relationship with somebody to start with. So design thinking is a great way to build that rapport and relationship. So as sales enablers, or those of us working in learning, we can also leverage design thinking as well. And let's be frank, anything that is a priority for our business and for our sellers, it becomes a priority that we need to support and drive to for us also. So we need to help drive innovation for our sellers and therefore so they can do it with their clients, and they need the right environment to do that. So the design thinking program is one example. But for us as enablers, we also need to innovate in the programs and approaches that we are delivering for sales enablement. They have to continually evolve. So I have another question for you. In the chat, think about, for those of you who have been in sales enablement or learning for a while, think about what you were doing in 2017 versus now in 2021. Give me a yes if it's the same. Give me a no if it's not the same. So Dinka is a no. Andrew is a no too. Anyone else? Well, mine is definitely like a huge no. It's evolved so much what I've been doing in sales enablement since I have been working in here. And so we need to continually evolve and innovate as well. So as sales enablers, we have so many different responsibilities and sometimes many different things that we're doing. And I remember there was a time when I was working in sales enablement and there was so much going on. I was drowning in Excel spreadsheets. I had extremely demanding stakeholders who thought that sales enablement was a bit of a delivery shop. There was so much going on and I was working ridiculous hours and I thought, this is just insane. And one day my manager came to me as I was drowning in everything and said, you need to innovate. And I just thought, like, how do you expect me to innovate when I have all these things piling on top of me? It seemed like it was just impossible. And so I the next day I kind of gathered my thoughts and I thought, well, hang on, maybe we can do this. And the way that everything is happening is not sustainable and it's not working. So I quickly gathered our enablement team and we ran a 1-hour design thinking workshop and we came up with ideas on what we wanted to do differently. So amazing ideas came out in 1 hour. And then we had another half an hour session where of all the ideas and things that came up, we then prioritized them using the design thinking prioritization grid and put an action plan together around them. And this was the foundation for what is our new approach for enablement. I just had to stop. I had to shift my thinking, gathered up everybody I could to come and give input. And we just, we changed the whole approach. So I'm sharing this with you because I think it's, we all have to have the right environment to innovate. In that example, I didn't feel like I was in it, but in changing a few things with the support of those around me, I was able to create an environment where extended teams were able to innovate. So all of us have that power. So the scale at which you use it is up to you. Maybe within your immediate team, you can change the culture there to create one that is more conducive to allowing innovation to happen. Because let's face it, innovation does not always work. There is a risk associated with it and it can fail. When it does fail, you want to just fail fast, capture the learnings you can and keep on going. But you have to have the right environment and the right support in place to ensure that that can happen. So all of us can help create and shape that culture. We can all be a change agent within our organizations, whether it's in your immediate team, a business, or your entire company. We can try and make this change. Now, the last thing I wanted to share you with. So, of course, we know that innovation is an imperative for business, it is for sellers, and it is enablement. And I believe that we also really need inclusion to help us innovate more effectively. So thank you. That's the end of the formal presentation now, but we do have a few minutes for questions. So if anybody has questions, now is the time. You can please pop them into the chat window and I can answer them now. While you're doing that, if you are interested in learning more on any of the topics that I've covered, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Love connecting and sharing ideas with different people. So don't hesitate to do that.
Yeah, Georgia, thank you so much for that presentation. It was awesome. And yeah, as Georgia said, we do have a few more minutes left. So if anyone does have any questions for Georgia, then please feel free to drop them in. So we have had a question here from Will, who just asked, what has been the biggest shift in your day-to-day job in the past 5 years?
Oh, Will, big question. It kind of seems like a lifetime ago, but 5 years in enablement for me was very much still focused around communications and communicating out to sellers and making sure sellers had the right product knowledge and basic sales skills. So that was kind of my focus then. Whereas now it's very much focused around tools, making sure the environment the sellers are working in is the most, conducive to help them be as effective as possible in their sellings, in terms of tools, culture, support that they have. And of course, skills are still there as well. I do spend a lot of time making sure that we have activities to boost skills. But when we used to do it 5 years ago, that was, we used to get everybody together in a room, or we would run, hour-long or 2-hour-long WebEx sessions. I think that's kind of the absolute bottom of the list at the moment of things that anybody wants in their life. So the big shift, I think, between 5 years ago and now is those areas, as well as the kind of when we are doing content and we are doing training, the approach that is being taken. So it's very much around micro learning and what I call accordion content. So we live in this world where everybody wants to be entertained. There's so many distractions on our phones from TikTok and everything else we have going on in our lives. So to me, this idea of edutainment is more important than ever. So we have to educate, but it also has to be done in an entertaining way. So it kind of becomes a bit of a marketing tool to make sure that people are really interested in what you're doing and you capture their interest. And there's many different ways you can do this, through, it might be, fun branding. It might be a totally different approach. We do a lot of like live quiz shows and different things like that, but packaging it up so it looks fun, even though the learning is in there. But that kind of package piece might be on top, but underneath is where you need this accordion content. So this is where once you get people in for the fun stuff, you have to have that supporting information underneath for them to dig into. And what you'll find more often than not is once you get them hooked in with that fun stuff, they will go and they will dig deeper and they will watch more videos and they will access more content to find out more. Whereas if 5 years ago, as we used to do, was send out an email and say, hey, look at these new videos we've produced around, X, Y, and Z, and expect that people would read the email for the first thing and then go there and diligently watch them. So that's some of the big shifts that I've seen.
Awesome answer. So yeah, the next question has said, what would you recommend for someone who is the only SE person at the moment in regards with innovation?
Yeah, it's hard when you're a one-man show. Like sales enablement does so much, and I bet you're being pulled in all different directions. My advice to you would be align yourself very well with your stakeholders. And if you want to innovate, make sure that they understand the value of what you are proposing. So you need to create something with input from different sources to make sure what you're creating is going to be really valuable to your sellers or to the end users. and then make sure you have your stakeholders all lined up, bought in, and in support of what you're doing. Obviously, as one person, it's very difficult to pull off on its own. And when it is very innovative and different, there's also a risk that it may not go to plan. It may be brilliant too, but if you don't try, you don't know. But if you have the support of all those stakeholders, hopefully from kind of diverse perspectives or positions within the business, they can help you spot some of those potential issues that may come up before you go live with anything. And then if it doesn't go to plan, then you're all in it together. You're a team. It's nobody turning around to point the finger at you and blame anybody. So I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. So we have time for just one final question. And that question is from Hendrik, who asked, how do you keep up with the changes in sales enablement? Like, which are the channels you are using?
Sales Enablement Collective, of course. No, seriously, I love LinkedIn. I have gotten more active on LinkedIn over the last couple of years, and I have found it to be such an amazing source of information. And there's some really strong communities of enablers who are out there at the moment. So, Sales Enablement Collective, get involved, Sales Enablement Society, and there's many other groups if you go and search. And what I found is there's so much goodwill around this area. It is a very quickly evolving and quickly growing space. And I've just, there's so many great insights and knowledgeable people in the group, but also such a great willingness to share knowledge and insights.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that does unfortunately bring us to time. Georgia, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us. And to everyone that tuned in, thank you so much. If you do have any more questions for Georgia, please feel free to reach out over on LinkedIn, and I'm sure that she'll be more than happy to continue the conversation over there and answer any questions you may have. So with that said, Georgia, thank you so much, and we'll see you all very soon.
All right. Thanks, Jack. Thanks for joining me.